Hello and welcome to the Gold Podcast, news and commentary from Gun Owners Action League, your leading voice for the Massachusetts gun owner.
I'm Garrett, recording with Jeff, who's not in the room. He's in an undisclosed location at a secret bunker in deepest dark.
Somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, the mid-Atlantic region.
What's going on with you?
Oh, just work travel.
Work stuff. Always
requires
fun.
you to be different places and do different things. So here I am.
Living the glamorous life of travel for corporate America, right?
Some people, I think that the whole idea of like work travel is fun. You say it's like hotels and restaurants and all that stuff. It's fun until you have to do it, until you have no choice.
Until it's work, right? And then when it's work, It's not fun anymore. Well, so we, just a couple days ago, we had the goal annual meeting at Cyprian Keys. That was a good time.
Yeah, up in Boylston. We've said it a ton of times before, but great facility, wonderful staff, always have done very well and treated Goal very well. So it was great to spend another morning with them.
Yeah, and we went out afterwards and did a little damage to the greens there at the golf course. That was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, I did about 103 pieces of damage. If my math is correct, and I think I gave myself a couple there. Not a great outing.
Hey, the worst day golfing, right? So
we played with Greg from the USCCA. Tremendous golfer. It's super fun to hang out with him. We get to see each other in passing here and there. So yeah, it was great to get out on the course.
As we roll into, I guess the summer's getting ready to begin soon. What's going on with Supreme Court?
Is no news good news at this point? Snope v. Brown and Ocean State Tactical v. Rhode Island, both relisted as distributed for conference for Thursday, 5/22. I expect it to be Friday, 5/23, but it says it's listed for Thursday. There seems to be no real end date in mind. I mean, the speculation continues as to why the can is being kicked down the road that bad. Perhaps, some people are thinking that, maybe they're waiting for a more ripe case like Duncan v. Bonta, also tackling things like magazine bans to make their way through in order to combine everything into kind of one big case and just address the issue, which, it'd be nice if we knew that.
They don't say anything.
Yeah.
Right. They just say no, or they just say yes, and we never know. It's always reading the tea leaves.
I very much understand them wanting to play those cards close to the chest. I can't fault them for that. But it would be nice to get a little wink on the side. Say, hey, listen, we're waiting for the right moment. But
we got you, fam.
Unfortunately, other than that, I mean, there's nothing we can do other than sit and wait. And unfortunately, it seems like it's not going to happen this term. The justices are going to go on their summer break soon. So probably, personally, I'm not expecting any movement till the fall. And of course, every time I say something like that, I'm proven wrong. So,
maybe you will be proven wrong. I guess, when do they go? Typically around the end of June. If they don't have something moving by probably, I think, the very first 2 weeks of June, I think it's going to be bumped for this session. I mean, there's just no time to do anything.
Well, certainly for a case that could have landmark implications. They don't take a lot of, really direct Second Amendment cases. So any decision they make is going to be very impactful for, oddly enough, 44 of the 50 states would have no problem with this. It's only about a half dozen that would really be affected, but it just goes to show how tightly those 6 are holding to their last little bits of control, that any decision that impacts their ability to stomp on the people would be considered a landmark decision. But, big case, it seems like it would be a big case. So I don't expect them to rush through it.
No, that's true. I guess, like you said, we're going to have to wait and see. It's always just like speculation and tea leaves and all that stuff at this point, because nobody really knows. But it is a record. These cases have been bump down the road, according to my reading, it is a Supreme Court record for the number of times they've been redistributed for conference. So, yay, you know. You found, and I hadn't read this, I thought it was still kind of pending from before, but you found some developments in the Brian Malinowski case.
Yeah, and we kind of half mentioned it, I think in the previous episode, but officially, so as of a few days ago, Maria Malinowski, the wife of Brian Malinowski, has filed a wrongful death suit in federal court against the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and 10 agents and task force officers following the death of her husband, Brian. After, if people don't remember, he was shot during the execution of a no-knock search warrant at his home on March 19th of 2024. Yeah. So she claims, and the suit claims, that the agents were acted recklessly and negligently. They said that, and this is the quote from the suit, the Constitution requires reasonableness, and specifically here, that defendants both knock and announce their presence and purpose and wait a reasonable time before entry. The ATF failed to do so, resulting in an entirely predictable, needless, and tragic outcome.
Sounds fair to me.
And I don't know how you argue that.
Yeah, no, it sounds totally fair to me. No knock warrant, pre-dawn.
Yeah, so according to the suit, I mean, Malinowski, I mean, and this is their claim, and they're obviously going to paint the guy in the best light possible because it's his family is attorneys, and obviously they like him. But according to them, so Malinowski was a lifelong firearms collector. He would attend gun shows on weekends and buy, sell, trade. He was like an aficionado. He didn't know he was under investigation, so reasonably believed that when someone was kicking in his door in the wee hours of the morning, that they were intruders. So he did what most Americans who value protecting their families and their homes would do, is he went to address the problem. Yeah. Or what he believed to be the problem.
The problem was, yeah.
And without any announcement of being law enforcement, he sees an intruder in his home, he shoots, it hits this ATF agent, and they return fire, and he ends up dead.
Basically what happened, and the response from the ATF is, the silence is deafening to me. Obviously they're going to say things like, oh, we don't comment on ongoing litigation, but we have yet to hear anything from the ATF or the government's position that leads anybody to believe that the guy was an actual threat. He had no violent history, no criminal history, no, he wasn't dealing with the gangbangers. He wasn't doing, there was no reason that we're aware of that would have justified a pre-dawn no-knock raid on the guy's house, when they could have walked up to his office at the airport and knocked on the door and said, hey, we'd like to talk to you about this paperwork stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they claim that he purchased somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 firearms between May of 2021 and February of 2024, and that he resold a bunch without a dealer's license. Now, obviously, under that time and under that administration, zero tolerance, and it was very clear that they had a bent against people doing that sort of thing. And the ATF has always maintained that, this is their position. They filed for this. They filed for the warrant. It was granted by a judge. So therefore they were, they had the righteous permission to go and do the thing. And as far as they're concerned, they made entry into a home on a good warrant. They got shot at and they returned fire. Yeah. So, according to them, it's one of those things of, we investigated ourselves and we found no wrongdoing.
Yeah.
Would it have gone a bit of a ways to hear them say, hey, listen, here's things we could have done better? I'm sure those conversations happened, but they won't say them publicly.
Oh no, they're never going to do anything.
And maybe that's protect yourself from litigation. You can't say publicly that you made a mistake. And maybe that's just the unfortunate reality of the world that we live in, that you can't admit that you made a mistake. Otherwise it's going to be, even more damaging. But, I guess you could say it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but we've discussed it several times before, of like, there was a million ways that could have been handled that would have been better, that required far less use of force.
Exactly.
And it's been an open critique for a long time of the overuse of no-knock warrants. yes, they have their place. Yes, they have their necessity. But, what is the average person supposed to do when their door's being kicked in the middle of the night and they have no real reasonable idea why? Even up to and including circumstances where the door being kicked in wasn't the right door from the warrant.
Yes.
And then they go, oh, hey, listen, we kicked in a door. People shot at us. We shot back. Hey, what do you do?
So instead of passing the buck and dismissing their own culpability in the matter, maybe somebody should be asking the question, earlier and saying, well, do we really need a no-knock warrant for this? The answer is probably no, we don't. So from my perspective, it's they're at fault for that reason, if no other. Because,
Yeah, and I think that's what the suit's claiming, is that it was reckless and negligent to approach an investigation in that manner.
Yeah.
With the utmost to the extreme, and realistically, someone with their level of experience and planning should have foreseen that, given the totality of the circumstances, this sort of thing could have or was a very realistic possibility.
Yeah. For sure. They did the maximum when several steps down would have probably got the job done.
So, the suit is seeking unspecified damages. They have specifically requested a jury trial.
Good.
Which would be interesting. So we'll see.
Yeah. Obviously they think that that they can pose a compelling and convincing story to a jury. So I guess we'll see. On the local level, there's a couple of developments from EOPSS you should know about. EOPSS, Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, has scheduled a series of, quote, virtual hearings for the purposes of gathering information about some of the components of the new Chapter 135 requirements. One could almost call it a listening tour.
Well, the question is when they say virtual hearing, do they just mean it's remote via Zoom, or do they mean like virtual as in it's not really real, we're not really listening?
Yeah, right. It's an air quote. It's a, yeah.
I feel like one of their lawyers will make that argument. Well, we were virtually here, right?
It's a hearing with air quotes. Yeah. First up is registration and serialization, Wednesday, May the 28th, 2025, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. This hearing is on the proposed regulation 501 CMR 19.00, which is registration of firearms, and 501 CMR 20.00, which is serialization of firearms. All right. That's the first one's happening this coming Wednesday. The next one is live fire mandate. There's two hearings for this. The first one is on Thursday, May the 29th, 2025, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., followed by another one Wednesday, June 4th, 2025, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. There's two hearings because they were mandated by Chapter 135 that says that they shall hold not less than two hearings on this subject. Why? Who knows? But that's what Chapter 135 says. So they're going to go through the motions, hold two hearings, and probably do whatever the hell they were going to do anyway. But anyway, the ostensible purpose is to study and report to the legislature on implementation of the live fire training for basic firearm safety classes within the state. So all of these meetings are online only via Microsoft Teams, but you can also call in by phone. You can submit testimony by email ahead of time to EOPSS attorney John Melander at john.melander, MELANDER @mass.gov. Meeting details, more information, we have it all up on goal.org/gun ban. Just scroll down the page a little bit and there's, links, information on how to get into the meetings, all that stuff is there, goal.org/gun ban. Now you, Jeff, have already made your opinion clear.
And I copied Mike Harris on it just to say, hey, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm sending. So he knows.
So what do you think about all this?
Well, I mean, to me, it's just such a remarkable slap in the face to the people of Massachusetts who participated in the listening tour. And it's like, when the state just shows time and time again, they are not going to listen to you. They're not going to take your advice. And really what they're looking for is to check the box so they can say, oh yeah, we talked to the people and this is what everybody wanted.
Yeah.
We created the compromise in our heads, and this is what the people really want. And I think the way I put it, it's like an abuser asking their victim how they would like to be abused. So therefore they can say, well, the abused person, that's what they wanted.
Like you were saying, that's like a best case interpretation of this. In reality, the reality is probably more like, the legislature said that we had to schedule meetings, so we're going to do it, but we're not actually going to listen to what anybody has to say about it.
No, because they've already put out guidance. When you read the stuff for registration and serialization, it's all in there.
Yeah.
They already have it all set up. It's already there. They just like, oh, if you guys have anything to chime in about.
Yeah, right. You can speak and we'll pretend to listen.
If anybody believes that they are going to radically shift the outcome of these regulations by some impassioned, what are they going to give you? 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
Yeah.
I mean, I got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn, but greatly encourage people to email, by all means, call. I submitted my stuff via email just because dates, times I can't, get on the phone, because nothing would make me happier than to tell them what I think. But if you have the ability to get on and, call in and speak your mind, I absolutely encourage you to. If you can't, by all means, send the email. You can speak on whatever is most passionate about, or tell them to go pound sand.
It is not illegal to be a jerk. It is not. You said it all. I can't agree with you more. I don't believe for a minute that they're actually interested in hearing anything that we have to say. They're just going through the motions. But yeah, I mean,
and it's a shame because
it's been ridiculous.
The individual people. It's like, I've met Kristen before. She's lovely.
Yeah.
The people.
Great. Yeah, the people are great. They're just trying to do their jobs.
When I talked to, I remember when Alzani was running the thing, and I ran into him at one of John's. He used to run, I believe it was all the training.
Yep, Lieutenant Alzani. Yeah.
Had a great conversation with him. Good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it blows my mind that when you get people on an individual level, you talk to local police officers, you talk to the sheriffs, you talk to the DCR men and women, Fish and Wildlife. They all agree with us.
Yeah.
They all say it's a joke. And it's like, well, hey, a little bit louder and when it counts, please.
Yeah, right. You're like, by the way, this is crap. And then, man. All right. Well, like I said before, check out goal.org/gun ban, or you can catch the link right on the top of the homepage. But definitely, it's not, we're like doing the cynical thing, and yeah, they're not really listening, but it really is important for us to engage. Everybody should at least send an email, sign in, call your representatives. You still have to make your voice heard, or they're just going to pretend that you're not there at all. So get involved and check that out. I will be on it. I think I'll be on all three of them, hopefully. And I'll see what we see from there. But I guess we'll see. Another local development is regarding frame transfers. Believe it or not, frame transfers may be back on the menu. Open this up by saying that this is not an official position of Gun Owners Action League or the podcast. We're providing this information for informational purposes only. We are not lawyers. I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. This is not legal advice. Okay? Everybody heard that? All right. Let's go. So, Custom Defense Solutions out of Littleton has asked their attorney, Neil Tassel, to have a look at the sale of pistol frames that are not on the approved firearms rosters. Right? Most people listening to this probably know that frame transfers have been a thing forever, because in Massachusetts, historically, pistol frames have not been considered firearms because they're not capable of firing a shot. Right? And it appears to some people anyway, that changed when Chapter 135 completely rewrote the definition of firearms to include pretty much everything. So there's a little bit of confusion there. Anyway, Custom Defense Solutions out of Littleton asked Neil Tassel to take a look at it. And Neil Tassel has rendered an opinion that you can find on goal.org. It's there in the Chapter 135 page. You can actually pull up a PDF of his opinion. So, I mean, there's no secrecy here. Neil Tassel is an attorney, but he's not your attorney, and he's not my attorney. So again, don't take this as legal advice. Anyway, this is all in context of the comment recently made by EOPSS attorney John Melander at a recent Firearms Control Advisory Board meeting. According to those meeting minutes, he stated that, quote, the analysis for frames is the same as the analysis applied to long guns, close quote. And again, quote, it should follow that frames do not have to be on the roster to be sold by a licensed dealer, close quote. So this is the EOPSS deputy counsel making this comment during the FCAB meeting. Retired police chief Ron Glidden, who's a member of the FCAB and a longtime Massachusetts gun law author, said, quote, frame transfers have been happening for many years, and that the only difference now is that someone will have to do a state and federal transfer, close quote. Attorney Melander was asked directly whether transferring an off-roster frame would be a violation of the law due to the new definition of firearm under Chapter 135. He said in the FCAB meeting minutes, quote, individuals may rely on the decision of the secretary with respect to rifles and shotguns to surmise that frames and receivers do not also need to be included on the roster, as the analysis is the same. So boiling that down to plain English, what's he saying? It seems that he's saying, number one, long guns don't have to be included on the approved roster. There's an EOPSS secretary memo from last October that says that. Okay. Number two, legal definitions are the same for pistols as they are for long guns, according to his interpretation. Number three, since the EOPSS secretary said that long guns don't have to be rostered and that the analysis is the same, the conclusion is that people can therefore assume that pistol frames also don't have to be rostered. So that is the rationale. Attorney Tassel also cited several memos from FCAB and EOPSS, as well as text from Chapter 135 itself. His bottom line opinion was that frame transfers are legal as long as they're properly transferred and registered and not otherwise illegal here. You can see a copy, like I said, of his full opinion and reasoning on gold.org. So what do you think about that?
It's really difficult to say. At this point, Chapter 135, it was supposed to be the bill that resolved all the questions and resolved all the issues and brought clarity to everything.
Constitutional challenge proof clarity to everything.
Yeah, it's about as clear as a concrete block. It's I very much, it's one of those things between my heart and my brain. My heart says, yeah, it's obviously legal. Everything's fine.
Yes.
The hell with the state, but I always feel the need to caution people to, assess things at your own risk tolerance.
Yeah.
And I like to reiterate that regardless of what a state agency guidance letter says, regardless of what anybody says, the person who holds the decision to charge you with a crime is like the district attorney.
Yeah, who might be gunning for higher office, could be. Yep.
They're the ones that can look and say, I don't care what they said. I don't care what advice you got. I don't care that you're a nice person.
Yep.
Exactly. I think for my purposes that you violated this and I'm going to throw the book at you. And
now you got to defend yourself.
Scenario, you don't end up in jail, but you lose your rights forever. Yeah. So it's one of those things where, it's one of the, in my opinion, the worst things that came out of Chapter 135 is it sets so many people up to have their entire lives destroyed over a misunderstanding.
Exactly. Yes, you're exactly right.
I think there's still at least a little bit of legal protection in the sense of, historically speaking, if a Massachusetts dealer is willing to sell you a firearm and do the paperwork, then presumably it is legal for you to purchase and possess. So, there's that. But
so yeah, go from there.
Just be careful, assess your risk tolerance. I wouldn't go dancing through a field of landmines.
Yeah. So
if you are looking into a frame transfer, if you're looking at something that's off roster, call your local dealer, talk to them first, make sure everybody's okay with it. From that standpoint, hey, go on gold.org, talk to a firearms attorney and say, hey, listen,
What do you think?
Here's my FFL. This is what we're going to do. This is what we want to do. What do you think?
Yeah.
I would much rather see people do that than, jump down the rabbit hole and say, I think this is going to be okay.
Yeah. Get in. And like a little bit of an admonition is like those gun shops, it's important to remember that gun shops, they have their own attorneys and their own interpretations. And they also have their different risk tolerance for being the legal test case for something like this. Not every gun shop has the resources to be able to defend. So they may just take the case that, maybe it's better if I just go hands off for now. So don't go like barging into a gun shop saying, hey, I want a frame transfer. If they don't want to do it, it's a policy decision. Just move on. There's somebody else who will. So, so yeah, it's still, this sounds like good decision to me. I think it's solid, but that's me. If I was a dealer, I would be transferring frames, but I guess it ain't settled till it's settled, right? So if somebody's eventually going to have to be the test case.
Yeah. You don't know until someone's butt's in the sling. And frankly, that's half the point. The law is designed to make you afraid to not step out of line.
Exactly.
And unless or until someone does, you don't file the suit. It's a whole mess.
That's
but
exactly
really
right.
the state's putting the risk on the people, and it's totally, totally unfair.
Yeah.
But sticking with the theme of, the state doing its own thing, for folks who haven't been checking their email or have anything from the state routed to junk, my heart's with you. But Mass Fish Hunt sent some emails out. They have transitioned to an updated online platform. It's designed to integrate with a bunch of other stuff the state had going on. So it now requires you to create an account with MyMassGov. It's a relatively new thing, but for those of you that had an existing Mass Fish Hunt account, you'll need to create an account with MyMassGov, and it will link it together. If you've already used state services, Mass Health, SNAP, anything like that, then you already have that account. But for the folks that just do the hunting thing, you'll have to go on. If you check through your emails, they do have instructions on how to do it. If you need help, you can always call Mass Department of Fish and Wildlife. Their customer service line number is 833-998-8240. Again, that's 833-998-8240. But it's worth taking the time to do it now, because if you forget and you find out the hard way when you have a deer on the ground this fall, it's going to be a pain in the butt. You're going to be trying to create users and profiles and passwords and linking things from a cell phone out in the woods, and that's not the position you want to be in. So
no, you're right. I need to do it because when I bought my hunting licenses for this year, it was still in the old system. So tons of licenses were sold on the old system, but in order to access it again, you're going to need to go through that step. So do it as soon as you can. Don't wait. Don't put yourself in that position. Don't forget. Right on. Also in developing news, I believe mentioned a couple of episodes ago about the Attorney General giving money to various groups here in Massachusetts. If we didn't, just in case anybody missed it, your taxpayer money is being used to fight against the repeal referendum for Chapter 135 directly. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell is distributing about $1 million in grant money. The first question is, why the hell is the AG giving out grant money to begin with? But I guess that's a different question. Anyway, she's giving this money to various anti-gun and community activist organizations across Massachusetts. She's got like this block of money, and she apparently has discretion to give it away to whoever she wants. Who she's choosing to give it to, it's being funneled to, among other groups, a group called Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. We know that name because they've been around for a while. It's a very well-known anti-gun group here in Massachusetts, anti-civil rights group in Massachusetts. They have nothing to do with gun violence. They just want guns gone. This group has recently formed a ballot committee with the express purpose of opposing the Chapter 135 repeal referendum and to get it shut down. They're not saying, oh, we support the law. They're saying, no. We are forming a ballot committee for the purpose of shutting down the referendum that we're trying to get passed now. So, I mean, you heard this right. The Massachusetts Attorney General a state officer is using taxpayer money via a political group to try to overturn a lawful petition by the citizens of this state. I mean, there's really no other way to put that. She's using taxpayer money to shut down your voting rights. I have never heard of a more blatant conflict of interest by a politician, but it's kind of par for the course in Massachusetts, given this legislature especially. It's disgusting and it's blatant and it's right out in the open. Nobody's even trying to hide it.
Yeah, how's that audit going?
Yeah, right. How's that audit going? Exactly.
But one of the things these groups are going to do, and this is what this money is going for, is specifically to spread misinformation and disinformation. So obviously, the misinformation being things that they just don't understand, and then the disinformation that's just flat out lies. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we said we were going to discuss was, how they approach this subject of school shootings. It's going to be one of the things that they leverage for why Chapter 135 is the utmost of necessity.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be the biggest marketing gag for them.
And what they're going to try to paint as the picture, it is going to be talked about as if they are the only ones who feel any remorse, regret, sorrow, sympathy, empathy for anybody who was negatively impacted by any of these situations or circumstances. And that's just a flat out lie.
We can disagree on the approach to it, but to claim that one group is the only group that's affected or cares about it, that's just disingenuous.
Yeah, that they have a monopoly on empathizing with victims of violence.
Yeah.
I think that there's no group who empathizes with victims of violence more than the Second Amendment community. Our approach is to arm people in a literal and figurative sense. I mean, literal if they choose to, but in the figurative sense of how to best protect themselves so that they don't become the victim. So when you hear terms, or when they use terms like school shooting, we'll put air quotes around that. Mm-hmm. What comes to mind and what they want you to think of is the memories of Columbine, of Parkland, Uvalde, Sandy Hook. They want you to think of the line of kids walking out of the school, the tragedies, and in tragedies they are. Yeah. And the sad thing is that they're largely preventable, despite what they're trying to paint. Because if you go on their websites, they'll say they'll provide these outrageous numbers. According to the gun control lobby, so since Columbine, Columbine's important to me because it happened in the spring of 1999, and I went into high school the fall of 1999.
I'm sorry.
I realize it's going to make me sound young to some and old to others, but
yeah, and it was also the first major incident of this type in the modern era. So it's almost like the starting line for what came after.
So they claim that more than 390,000 students in the U.S. have experienced gun violence at school. They say that since 1997 up until 2022, and this is their numbers, not mine, mm-hmm. that there are 1,453 school shootings. Now,
do the math on that.
People are going to say, well, I remember certain ones, but I don't remember 1,453.
Yeah. But because they said so, it must be true.
We're going to walk through this, and there's going to be some numbers, and there's going to be some data and all that stuff. And I know we talked about, you can't logic someone in and out of positions they didn't use logic to get to. But the reality is you have to explain how you reach the conclusions that you do. So, okay, then what are they considering a school shooting? Let's understand the terms and let's get on the same page. What we find is that there's a lot of differences and discrepancies based on who's doing what. There were papers written, and I found published scholarly research just in trying to understand how people define these things.
So, wait, so they're not addressing the issue. They're addressing the definitions.
They're just looking at how do you do this data analysis? Because everybody uses different definitions, and some include this, some don't include that.
They stretch that definition to include almost everything to get the numbers up so it fits their agenda.
Yeah. So when you look at what the CDC is using to define school shootings, it's anywhere on the property of a functioning school on the way to or from school sessions, while attending or traveling to or from school-sponsored events, and that includes students, non-students, and faculty. Then you get into so every town's idea of what they're counting as school shootings, and that's anytime a firearm's discharged inside, into, or onto school grounds. And that includes any bit of so they kind of merge in with the CDC thing of like anything even remotely school related gets tied in. And then when they say school grounds, that means anything the school has access to. So when you say, well, anytime a bullet lands anywhere on any of their property, that's a school shooting, you start to see that the numbers that they're claiming isn't representative of the story they're trying to tell. So even if you go back to 2024, we talked about on the podcast, there was the Cambridge resource officer who was in a school and was using the bathroom and, without even getting into it because it's irrelevant to the conversation, but that is counted as a school shooting in the exact same weight as Parkland, as Sandy Hook. So the question for me is, yes, we all agree that those named incidents, the ones that have grown to have this infamous reputation, are awful and tragic. But why are they conflating seemingly unrelated numbers? Two teenagers of ill repute have a drug deal gone wrong in OSU University's football stadium parking lot in July when there's nothing happening.
Right.
They're saying that counts no more or less different than Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
And they're like, so like, why are you padding your stats? The tragedies are tragedy enough, and we all remember them. We all feel horrible. So like, why do you feel the need to pad the number?
So what occurs to me when I read stuff like this is there is actual research out there that show that Americans like hugely overestimate how often mass attacks happen, like the Uvalde, Columbine, Parkland attacks. They do research and they do polls, and it's like, this is how many times people think big events like that happen, and here's the actual numbers, much, much smaller. So it's an impression. It's a false impression. People think that the risk of being a victim of a school shooting is like a common threat. The facts prove, however, that this fear is just not grounded in reality. So there's a real disconnect there, and that's the numbers that you're talking about. The manipulation of numbers in order to reach a conclusion that, I would argue is agenda-driven.
Yeah, and it doesn't make anything any less tragic. So the information that I came across, and I'm reading up on, Sandy Hook Promises website, every town's website, and I'm looking at the information they're putting out. There's whole pieces on their thing saying that you can prevent school shootings when you know the signs. And that really stuck out to me, and I ended up going down that rabbit hole. And I found a study going all the way back to 2004. This is data that's existed for over 20 years. It was an initiative. It was the Safe School Initiative. And the report was titled Implications for the Prevention of School Attacks in the United States. This was done by the U.S. Secret Service and Department of Education following the Columbine shooting. And the numbers have stayed consistent. Just to show that this information has been around for 20 years. So they gather data on everything. And I mean, this is the Secret Service. They profile threat, like
that's their job.
Their claim to fame is profiling threats, although in the last 18 to 24 months, maybe it hasn't been as great, but historically speaking, that's been their thing. So they came up with a few basic conclusions, and bear in mind, these are still true to today.
Yeah.
The attacks are almost never impulsive. Like people don't just snap. So more than 90% of attacks are planned out, usually for weeks or months in advance. One of the other things they found was that there is no type, and we'll put type in air quotes, there's no stereotype that exists that can be used to identify a potential attacker based on who or where they come from. It's all economic and social backgrounds. They found that there are warning signs almost every single time. Roughly 75% of attackers told someone about their plans. That's a number that's actually gone up just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because back in 2004, the internet wasn't what it is now. So actually, even now, when they start combing social media profiles, that number's actually gone up, not down.
Text.
So
yeah.
So now it's more than 3 out of 4 tell somebody. They publish their plan somewhere for someone to see, and it's usually seen by a peer. 90% showed concerning behavior, writing violent stories, talking about wanting revenge or withdrawing from social interactions, history of depression, suicidal thoughts, and recent personal loss. So these aren't out of the blue blitz attacks that nobody sees coming. They're usually more of a slow burn. Clues are there, but the catch is that people see the signs and they either don't want to believe it or they just don't think to pass that information on.
They have found ways that actually work in preventing this stuff before it becomes a problem. Like one thing the Secret Service and the Department of Education found was that schools could have threat assessment teams. And these are teams of, educators, law enforcement, parents, et cetera, working together to recognize risk factors. Student peers should be encouraged to speak up if they see something that's concerning. Right? Don't just ignore it or blow it off. And they need to be taken seriously when they speak up. Parents and teachers can work closely together, not against one another, to foster that environment of communication. This is from the Secret Service and the DOE stuff from 20 years ago. So there are solutions that work that don't involve just knee-jerk removal of rights from people.
I mean, it's what we've been talking about. What it means in the end is that this whole philosophy of banning firearms as a means to end school shootings, it's in effect, and by definition, a conspiracy theory. There's this belief that this secret influential cabal organization that they just claim, they just call the gun lobby.
The gun lobby, all in capital letters,
is responsible for this, and no one else, absolutely no one else bears any responsibility. So they use things like attribution biases, confirmation biases, proportionality biases. Of course, it gives them an umbrella of moral superiority. It's to paint gun owners as those, the bitter clingers that would rather watch children die than give up their toys.
Right. So where does this all leave us? I mean, the bottom line is that the most effective solutions that we can recognize center on recognizing warning signs, building trust, intervening early. That's what the research finds, not by banning guns or treating people like criminals. Think about it. There was a time not that long ago when kids brought rifles to school for shooting team practice, when pickup trucks with gun racks were in the high school parking lots. This is living memory. You could order a rifle through the mail from a Sears catalog. And yet mass school shootings of the type of the Columbines and the Sandy Hooks, they were unheard of. So what changed? What's different? It's not the guns. Semi-auto pistols have been around for more than a century, and even the much maligned AR-15 has been available on the commercial market since the 1960s. Even if the scary black rifles were less common, the ammo, the fire rates, the capacity of other guns more commonly available at the time were the same. So the technology isn't the issue. The technology did not change. The people changed. We have become more isolated. We have medicated more. We've lost community. We've glorified violence in the media, and we give instant fame to people who kill people by plastering them all over the news. We raise a generation of young people who, in many cases, have no strong moral foundation, very little adult guidance, and no way to really deal with suffering other than lashing out and enacting revenge. To my mind, anyway, that's the root of the crisis. It's not a hardware problem. It's a human problem. If easy gun access caused school shootings, we'd have had thousands of them from the 40s through the 1980s, right? But we didn't. What changed is not the availability of firearms, but the mental, the cultural, and the moral health of the country. That's the conversation I don't think that we're having enough. And until we really have it, no number of new knee-jerk laws is going to solve the problem we're actually facing.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at previous information, like you said, this is a phenomenon of the last 30 years. When you look at crime data and going back to the 60s, I was able to find information from gun control lobby studies that documented, every time a firearm was brandished, fired, bullets hit school property, all the things that they talk about to pad the numbers, which, by the way, interestingly enough, what 3 months most school shootings happen in?
Well, you're saying 3 months.
June, July, and August.
Yeah. You said 3 months, so I was going to assume during the summer months. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny?
June, July, and August is when most of them happen. When the kids aren't in school and they're running around and getting into all sorts of nonsense.
Right.
When they started looking through, all the variety of incidents and the top states that have the most incidents of these school shootings, it's like California, Texas, Florida, Illinois, Ohio. Mm-hmm. It's like California, strict laws. Texas, not so strict. Florida, not so strict. Illinois, strict.
Yeah.
When you get to the bottom of the list that have the smaller numbers, You get, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, West Virginia, Maine, Vermont, Hawaii, Wyoming. So it's like it is across the board.
It's all over
a variety of firearms regulations and firearms laws. It doesn't track one way or the other with this broad spectrum to say that there is a correlation between firearms laws and incidents of school shootings. The data does not support that conclusion.
Yeah,
at very best, it's inconclusive. So what does correlate? And the reality is that no one flavor of thing correlates exactly that you can say, well, it's a one-for-one exchange. But looking at what has radically changed in society in the last 30 years, okay, school shootings radically changed. But what else has radically changed? Things that have better correlation than gun control laws is number of homes connected to the internet, number of people connected to social media, the rate of prescription of mental health medication. So I think just last year, and if my numbers are correct, there was 50, about 130 million prescriptions for SSRIs, SNRIs, anti-anxiety medication, ADHD medication. There are more people now in counseling and therapy and psychologists, and the access to mental health has never been higher. Yet, the reported incidence of mental health issues has also gotten higher. We see these things, these intense violent outbursts. Yep. Maybe a small proportion of people. And it's not to say that there is a particular causal link with any one of them, but it's curious to ask why something that has been around for centuries, the same technology that hasn't changed, when all the things that radically changed our society, no, let's not talk about that. Let's not ask questions. Let's not judge.
And why? Because it's easy. If you can inflate your numbers high enough, kind of like coming back around to the beginning, if you can inflate your numbers high enough to encompass anything, then it makes it feel like these type of horrible incidents are happening every day when they're not. And it's easier to sell these sweeping policy ideas that look good on paper and they sound easy because, who cares about those gun owners anyway? But in reality, they don't address the real problem. And the real problem is those things that you were talking about.
So understanding that the relationship between gun control laws and school shootings is at best inconclusive. When we zoom out to that 1,000-foot view, it's not a solution. And I'm in the camp of people that says, if it's not a known solution where we can definitively say, yes, this is absolutely a causal link, then I think that's a poor way to frame taking away the civil liberties of 7 million Massachusetts residents.
Yeah.
And, and extrapolate that, because if you ask any of the gun control folks, they want it nationwide. It's not just Massachusetts.
Of course. They want everything. I like to say that policy is downstream from perception. If the public believes that these are happening every other day, it becomes easier to sell, like I said. The result, however, is always the same. The restrictions, and this is something that you've pointed out on this podcast many times, the restrictions aren't falling on the criminals. They're falling on the people that haven't done anything wrong. And since the consequences are aimed at the wrong people, the problem never gets better. And when the problem doesn't get better, then the answer from the gun control side is always, well, then we need even more restrictions.
Yes. And I think that there are certainly those in the gun control organizations that have nefarious intent, that are using tragedy to reach those ends.
Never let a crisis go to waste.
But there is a reality that a lot of the people who are in favor of these policies don't have the experience with firearms, and they're taking that at face value because, the gun control lobby is saying we care so much that we are willing to do anything. And that if you do not reach that conclusion, you don't care as much as they do.
Right.
Utterly, utterly false. And that is the part that is the disinformation. That's the lie. Now, when we talk about the safety of students, like let's not just say that they're wrong, but let's offer some solutions. I travel around. I'm somewhere on the East Coast right now.
In an undisclosed location.
Most of the buildings I go into require badge access. Even if you wanted to go to the State House to speak to your legislator, you got to make an appointment. You have to provide ID. You're going to go through a metal detector. You're going to be wanted down. You're going to be on camera 24 hours a day. They can throw you out at any time. Yeah. Now, when you say, hey, why don't we do that for schools? They say, oh, well, geez, I mean, that would make school look like a prison.
We can't have that. So here's this sign.
It's not a prison for the State House. It's not a prison for all the companies that I go to. It's not a prison for anybody else. Why would that make it a prison for kids?
It's not too much to ask to lock the doors. Yeah.
You don't have to have armed security in the sense of like dudes in vests all strapped up, but you need to have a plan. Have some resources in place where if you start identifying a student's in trouble, take it seriously, move on it, provide them the help that they need. Let's head it off at the pass and let's not have this thing happen.
Head it off. And then at the same time, you can leave the rest of us alone.
You can do all of those things without trying to, revise 250 years of Constitution, civil rights. There are options other than this, and they all correlate better to solving the problem. That's why I make the argument that this isn't going to work, and that's why I don't support this nonsense of Chapter 135.
Well said. I mean, I don't know how I can improve on that, so I'm not going to try. Folks, it's up to you to, employ your own BS detectors, read the actual data, not the emotional stuff, and form your conclusions. In the meantime, remember to go check out the Chapter 135 hearings that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. Go to goal.org, find those. Please get involved. Call your folks, your legislators, send the email, get on the Zoom, make your voices heard. That is going to do it for today. Thank you for listening in. Be sure to subscribe to the Goal Podcast and check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Goal Podcast MA, on YouTube at The Goal Podcast, or on Twitter at Goal Update.
To join Goal, visit goal.org and click the Join Renew button on the top of the homepage.
If you have a topic you think we should cover, if there's something going on in your club or your town, or if you have a question for the mailbag, shoot us an email at goalpodcast@goal.org.
The Goal Podcast is a production of Gun Owners Action League of Massachusetts. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Goal, its staff, or affiliates.